So now some of the other things that we're doing here to make it easier on our tech staff and on our actual building staff. One of the things that we are doing is account provisioning for our staff accounts. Our student accounts too?
Not student.
Not student yet, so just our staff accounts. So what we've put together, there's a little flow chart that explains how this works. I'll let David talk about it in a second. But to me, we will explain kind of why we did it in a second. But this was an additional cost at the beginning. It's saving my staff time. It's stuff that we probably didn't have the programmers, or definitely at the time didn't have the programmers on staff to make this happen. So I'll let David walk you through how this thing actually works for account provisioning.
Yeah, so actually what we'll do is we'll start, when I talk through it, we're going to start at our own directory level. So we have our staff accounts are all in Novell's E directory, which is an LDAP 2 compliant directory. Which,
just like Active Directory is.
Yeah, yep. So I'm going to use the words LDAP now, which will represent that Active Directory and E directory can both talk to these systems equally well. So what we do is, on our staff side, we have 3 staff domains, one for each school, even though all of their emails end up having the same domain name. But what we worked with the third-party vendor was they wrote a script. The third party is SADA Systems, and they basically are using Google's APIscript to run a check against the containers in our Active Directory and our LDAP tree to look and scan for certain activities, either adds, changes, moves, deletes. As it parses through our directory, if a user is also in the group that we call everyone, then they are provisioned with a Google account, and that account becomes active. So at that moment, they have a password and an account into Google, and that script is a nightly script that runs at 1 in the morning, something like this. So if I create a new user in LDAP right now, by next morning, that user will be provisioned in the system. At this moment, we don't do anything with adding any rights. We essentially allow all staff members to have access to every single application that's in the tree on the Google side. The other part that we're not doing yet, and we're still exploring, is some of the, if you've seen the advanced control panel in Google, there's things where you can make subdomains of your main domain.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Already, but we're staying away from it at this moment because you lose some functionality when you bring different subdomains underneath your main domain. So you lose some of that granularity of control that, as far as our situation goes, is something that we still need to have, especially in delineating the rights that the student's domain has versus the staff domain. So really the only thing on the Google Admin control panel, as you can see on the slide, is the Enable Provisioning API box is checked. So we check that, and then the API was written at that moment. So they actually, SADA makes a call into our LDAP server every night. We just stood up, a different directory, kind of a secure directory server in our DMZ that simply syncs the directory information, or is made available for SADA to sync the directory information. The second piece that we also work with SADA on is the single sign-on. And if you go to, if you type in sso.maine207.org, you're presented with the login screen that you see kind of on the right of the slide. So you put in your current Novell username and your current password, and at that moment, so that server sits at SADA Systems, and then they do, every time you log into this, they do a check against our LDAP server to verify that the password that was entered is indeed the correct live password. If it's not, it returns a "you can't log in" message. If does return an accurate password according to our LDAP system, it not only redirects you to Google, but it also tells Google that you're allowed to log in. So at that moment, it doesn't, one important thing to remember with SADA is they're not storing any of our passwords. It's a one-way encrypted password that's then sent to Google. So at that moment, let's say that you change your password in the morning, as long as when you log in through SADA, as long as SADA sees that you have a legitimate password, the other piece of what SADA does is it will pass and sync that password back into Google. So that if you have an iPhone or a BlackBerry or a mobile device that you're trying to use, your password will change at the same time that you log in successfully to the SSO page.
Okay, so when we made the decision to do this, first of all, I had some requirements. If you look at under the major gains at the bottom, I had some requirements from my position that I thought were requirements, and one was the ease of use. I wanted the staff to instantly buy into the idea of using these products, and not having to remember another username or password helped greatly in the instant buy-in from our staff. Also, I wanted us to be able to take full availability of the mobile piece, so I needed to hook together our password with the one at Google. I know there's a couple of different ways you can set up the SAML authentication. One of them parses the password all the way over to Google, or passes the password all the way over to Google. The other one doesn't. We wanted the version that does, so that they could leverage mobile devices using that same username and password that they would use within our walls or on a browser. So we partnered with SADA. As David said, we didn't have the programming staff here at the time. Also, there wasn't a lot of people using Google API and the scripts at that time. So there wasn't a huge user base to like bounce ideas off of or people playing with it. So we didn't want to be the first ones to give it a shot. We talked to Northwestern University, who's in our backyard, and said, because they were using a single sign-on as well, and we picked their brains for who they used. We looked at what they were doing, and that's how we ended up with SADA, because that's who they were using. But now that it's in place and there's enough of a user group out there using these scripts and developing these scripts, we're going to take the ones that we have now and start adapting them and leveraging them into the future for our student accounts and anything else that we continue to add. We also like the idea that we host that SSO server at Google off-site to assist us with disaster management, so that that's one less thing that we're maintaining within our walls. And we've also used the rename tool for staff members that change their name. Every summer it seems like we have several hundred of these. It may be only 10, but it feels like several hundred, and that tool's been effective for us as well. The thing at the very bottom of the slide here, the leveraging of the marketplace, I think, is an important piece with this. Because there's buy-in and people only have to remember one username and password to get into Gmail, it makes leveraging the marketplace and putting other apps there through Google's login, like Aviary, we're using that one, ManyMoon are two that we've deployed for our students and staff that are getting some acceptance and use from that. It's like deploying a whole other piece of software without having to touch a computer anywhere. So, and it just helps that they just have to remember that one username and password and they're there. So as we go into the future here with Google, we're anxiously awaiting Google to allow us to start turning on other services. That's one of the downfalls of being with SSO, is with some of the changes they're making right now, they're not allowing customers that have SSO to deploy the other services yet. We're hoping that we're hearing and hoping that that is coming soon. we're debating down the future when we start to roll control panels together so that we're not managing stuff in, 5 or 6 separate places, try to save us a little bit of time. But as of right now, it hasn't been unduly burdensome to even manage those separate domains. Dave, you want to talk about the next one with internal directory services?
Yeah, as you know, we're trying to make sure that we're actually planning on leaving Novell throughout the coming year and going over to Active Directory. So we're actually discussing kind of a long-term vision, just as the way our directory works. And really what we want to do is to align ourselves with kind of the way that we see Google, and if we do any other, if we work with any any other cloud software providers, to really just try to lay out our directories so that it matches up in a logical manner as far as regarding what we're going to, when we give rights to certain applications, or if, especially if Google's some of their directory structures become more complex, we want our back-end system to be lined up so that it can better manage that piece of it.
And then, as I mentioned before, our goal is to do with our student accounts the same level of provisioning that we're doing with our staff accounts, and we'll work our way there after we move to Active Directory. We're kind of in that in-between spot, so we don't want to invest a lot of time in that at this point. So that's all the slides that we have for you. So at this point, I guess if there's any other questions or comments, we'll be more than happy to field those.
Great. This is Rachel again. For those who joined us late, we have quite a few who joined after we started. We did record this session, so I'll send the link just as soon as possible for that recording so you can watch the whole thing, because there's really valuable information at the beginning also. Hank and David, thank you very much. That was, first of all, it answered a lot of my questions just immediately, and we're facing a lot of those same issues, especially with the existing personal accounts. Our ESD is moving our staff architecture currently, and I'm one of those conflict accounts. So we're working through that too, and we're trying to document as we go. And I know Steve O'Brien, I think he might be on the call. We just realized why our SSO wasn't working from one domain to the other, and it was because we had been put on the next generation architecture, and you're right, it's not ready for SSO yet.
That's correct. Yeah, that's one huge thing that you miss with that. And I think there is one page, not to talk too bad about Google because they're giving us this great service for free, but one page, there's a single page, and if I can remember it, I'll forward it to Hank, that lists all of the things that the next generation directory panel can't do. And it's a pretty significant list, and it is not easy to find, But I'll see if I can look that up and send it through Hank. That
would be great. And we do have Steve Prohl is asking, and it's a question that I was actually going to ask myself too, so this is good. You talked at the beginning about having the 3 separate domains, and I really liked the benefits that you outlined with being able to identify students as students, staff as staff, for outside people just by their domain name. But now that there are organizational units available, on your last slide you kind of talked about, looking at how to consolidate. Do you think that you'll take more advantage of organizational units rather than separate domains?
Well, I think on the short term, no, because the way that those are currently set up is your subgroups in your directory or your organization, however you want to term it. Right now you can turn on and off services to those, but once it's on or off, they have all of the same settings. So like if I wanted to turn on Google Documents and limit it to the domain, that would be for everything and everybody in my organization that had Google Documents on. I couldn't turn on Google Documents and limit it to the domain for my students and have Google Documents on for the world for my staff. So because you lose some of that granular control, we're still leaning towards maintaining those other domains. David, you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, and honestly, we've worked through, that was another, it's not really a gotcha, but it's more of a growing pain setup where the teachers right now, like in our group-wide system before, it was pretty easy for us, because the kids were also in our eDirectory structure, and the two products were GroupWise and NetMail. NetMail, I don't know if you know much about it, but it was it integrated with Novell eDirectory, but then it was a very light mail web-based server. But a staff member could begin typing a student's last name in the to field of their GroupWise and immediately be presented with, every kid with the last name Smith or whatever. And so they could more easily find their kids. Because the two domains are separate, we've had to do a little retraining. That was definitely a feature that we lost when we moved. And actually, when I saw the next gen control panel and the subdomains, I was very excited. Finally, we're going to be able to, put our student and staff domains together in a way that made sense. But it's whatever the feature set isn't there yet, or the way that we prefer it to work. And maybe it'll never be changed into that, or maybe they're headed in that direction. We also have some issues especially with Google Sites. A lot of our teachers are using Google Sites to share information with their students, but it still needs to be contained within our organization. So we run into a situation where typically we allow a staff member to make a Google site not only share with our staff domain, but then we give them the ability to share with the world as well. So we've had to train them to actually take a step back from the world, especially if it's a kind of a private class website, and instead gather the list of their students' email addresses and essentially put the onus of managing their Google site on them and connecting their students that way.
Some teachers have been able to leverage the idea of using groups for their classes and make that easier on themselves. Others aren't there yet. We're in different spots.
Yeah.
When we talked about, staff development and that kind of stuff, we're now ramping up a lot of the training and getting to the point where a lot more of our teachers have those skills.
Yeah, and speaking to groups and sites as well, those two features, I guess I'm always kind of unsure which exact direction Google is headed with what their emphasis is on for certain products. At some points, it looked like sites was going to be the spot where they wanted people to, no, I take it back, groups.
Yeah,
one of them was
like
going to be the place
yeah.
Like if you wanted to share a large number of documents, it's actually easier to do that in sites now. Whereas before, I thought groups has a better, I feel like a better management of the people, so that you can send, an email to the group. You can control who's able to send an email to the group. But I think a combination of groups and sites is really the two pieces that allow, if you have disparate domain names, if you have, like ours are definitely totally separate domain names, between those two applications, we're able to still tie the domains together, even if it's not through the control panel.
Right.
I see the question up there about the different laws that are up there. If we go through each of them, SEPA is a law that, it's not even a law, it's an FCC requirement that if you're accepting E-rate funds that you need to filter pornographic or obscene images. Really, there's nothing with the Google Apps product that matches up with SEPA. We control that through our web filter. COPA, we have no students under the age of 13 in our school because we're a high school district, so we don't have to worry about that. However, if you actually look at the COPA law, it's written for consumer organizations that are gathering dollars for using their product. Since you are hosting COPA, or hosting Google Apps, and you are not a consumer organization, it actually doesn't apply to you. However, because you never disclose any of your students' information through Google Apps to Google or anybody else, you're fine with that requirement as well. And if you wanted to cover yourself even further, you could just have a parent permission or a parent notification that you are using Google with your kids while they're at your school. FERPA, FERPA, there's more concerns with that with not the product, but teacher and staff behavior. I mean, that limits us to not disclosing student records to those that aren't supposed to have it and disclosing it to those that do. My concerns are more with staff doing inappropriate things with any product, whether that be our student information system, email, docs, anything, disclosing information that they shouldn't. So to me, that's more of a staff training and responsibility piece than the tool itself. And then HIPAA, well, that's for health provider organizations. I could see if you're a special ed cooperative or someone that's providing those kinds of health records, or maybe even on the outside your nurse's office. However, that I would go back to the FERPA answer, and it's more your staff's behavior than the product itself. Google allows for all of the security for the HTTPS to force people to use that. That would protect you from privacy if you wanted to go all the way and protect that way. So far as that, I don't think that there's anything with there's nothing in that list of regulations or laws that concerns me with the Google products.
Okay, I think I know from talking to several people lately that I appreciate those answers, Hank, because that's really consistent with what we're hearing from the actual agencies involved, whether it be the FCC for SIPA, the FTC for COPPA, the Department of Justice and the Departments of Education for FERPA. Those are consistent with what we're hearing here also. And as Greg mentioned in the chat window, regardless of the fact that we are educational institutions and therefore we are exempt from COPPA, we do still require a parental agreement in Oregon, so we kind of have double coverage there.
Perfect.
Okay, any final questions for Hank or David? Gentlemen, again, thank you very much. I really appreciated your presentation. You're welcome to stay with us for the next few minutes. I'm going to do a rapid fire list of our kind of things that we're going to be going over for Oregon, and if you log off before then, I'm definitely following up with a couple of thank yous and our eternal gratitude.
We'll stick around for a few minutes, and then we'll also, over the next couple of days, send you those links we referenced.
Great. And do you mind if I share that slideshow? You had sent me the links, I think it was yesterday. Do you mind if we share out your deck that you've used today?
Go ahead. And like I said, we'll share with you the site and the link to that document about the limitations.
Great. Okay. And now I'm going to, Steve O'Brien, are you still on the call? I'm going to put you on the spot for a moment because when we're talking about SSO, this is going to kind of funnel into our next meeting, which I'll send out a note as soon as we get everyone in line. But we do have an SSO provider that we're using internally at our own ESD, and I think it's JSIG is how they say it. It's the CAS architecture. And so I thought I might put Steve on the spot to, oh, he just hung up. So we'll put him on the spot on our next call. I believe that that's a free and open source solution that we're using. And I know he's been able to, minus the glitch with running into the next generation Google dashboard not allowing SSO, it looks like our accounts have been provisioned and things are going well. So we'll get an update on that next time.